I lost a bet to my sister. Now I have to live as a girl for 24 hours. I didn't expect a mirror to feel like a courtroom. That was the first thought that hit me as I stood in my sister's bedroom, staring at my reflection like it had just announced a verdict I couldn't appeal. 24 hours. That was the deal. One stupid bet about exam scores and chores and who could survive a week without their phone. I lost. She won. And now, because of my own arrogance, I had to live as a girl for an entire day. It sounded funny when we shook on it. It didn't feel funny anymore. The dress was hanging on her closet door like a quiet threat. Soft lavender. Light fabric. Harmless, really. But to me it felt heavier than armor. My sister, Alina, stood behind me with her arms folded, trying not to smile too widely. "You promised," she said gently, not mocking, just certain. I nodded, throat dry. I had promised. The rule was simple. No half measures. I couldn't just throw on a skirt and hide in my room. I had to step outside. I had to interact. I had to live fully and openly as a girl for 24 hours. I remember laughing when I agreed. What's the worst that could happen? I'd said. Now, standing barefoot on her bedroom carpet, I realized the worst wasn't humiliation. The worst was what I might feel. I picked up the dress. The fabric slid through my fingers like water, cool and smooth. My heart thudded harder with every second. This wasn't just fabric. It was a line, and I was about to cross it. "Do you want help?" Alina asked, softer now. I swallowed my pride before I swallowed my fear. "Yeah." As she guided me through it, careful, patient, I felt layers of something peeling away. Not masculinity, not identity, something else. Certainty, maybe. When the dress finally settled against my skin, I froze. The mirror didn't laugh, just stared back. My shoulders looked narrower somehow. The color made my skin look lighter. My posture shifted instinctively, like my body understood something before my mind did. "This is just a game," I whispered to myself. But my reflection didn't look like it was playing. Alina stepped beside me, adjusting the neckline gently. "You don't look ridiculous," she said. "You look different." Different. That word echoed. I wasn't wearing a costume. I wasn't pretending to be a caricature. I just looked like a softer version of myself. The mirror became the motif of that moment. A silent witness. A judge. A storyteller. And as I stared into it, something unsettling crept into my chest. What if I didn't hate this? I told myself the discomfort was just shock. That anyone would feel strange seeing themselves reframed like this. It wasn't identity. It wasn't revelation. It was just unfamiliar angles and softer lines and fabric brushing against knees that weren't used to being uncovered. But when Alina sat me down in front of her vanity mirror, the second trial began. "You can't go out like this," she said gently. "It has to look real." Real. That word pressed against my ribs harder than the dress ever could. She brushed my hair differently, parting it with slow concentration. My reflection shifted again. Less like a boy wearing something borrowed, more like a story being rewritten. Every tiny adjustment felt symbolic. A little foundation, just enough to even out my skin. A light touch of mascara. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. Just subtle changes that felt terrifyingly natural. I watched the mirror more than I watched her hands. The mirror wasn't mocking me. It was observing. With every brushstroke, my expression changed. First, I looked tense. Defensive. Like someone bracing for laughter. But then something else surfaced. Curiosity. I leaned forward slightly, studying the softness around my eyes. The way my lips looked fuller when I stopped clenching my jaw. The way my posture shifted when I wasn't forcing it to be rigid. "Relax your shoulders," Alina whispered. I did. And in that instant, the person in the mirror exhaled too. There was no thunderclap of realization. No dramatic music. Just a quiet awareness creeping into the room. This wasn't just about clothes. It was about how I held myself. For years I'd carried this invisible weight, this expectation of how I should sit, speak, walk. Strength meant stiffness. Confidence meant volume. Vulnerability meant weakness. Now, sitting in that chair with the lavender dress pooling around my knees, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. It scared me. "Okay," Alina said finally, stepping back. "Stand up." I did. The dress swayed slightly as I moved. That tiny motion hit me harder than anything else so far. I wasn't used to fabric responding to me like that. It felt expressive, like the mirror wasn't just reflecting me anymore. It was introducing me to someone. "Do you want to back out?" she asked quietly. The easy answer would have been yes. But something stubborn flickered inside me. Not pride. Not ego. Curiosity again. "No," I said, surprising myself. "Let's finish this." She smiled, but not in victory. In understanding. The final step was shoes. Low heels. Nothing dramatic. But when I slipped my feet into them and stood, the world tilted slightly. My balance shifted. My center of gravity changed. So did my perspective. I was taller in a different way. Not physically. Emotionally. The mirror showed someone who looked nervous but composed. Uncertain but present. For the first time since losing the bet, I didn't feel like a victim of a joke. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand yet. And the scariest part? I didn't want to look away. I told myself the discomfort was just shock. That anyone would feel strange seeing themselves reframed like this. It wasn't identity. It wasn't revelation. It was just unfamiliar angles and softer lines and fabric brushing against knees that weren't used to being uncovered. But when Alina sat me down in front of her vanity mirror, the second trial began. "You can't go out like this," she said gently. "It has to look real." Real. That word pressed against my ribs harder than the dress ever could. She brushed my hair differently, parting it with slow concentration. My reflection shifted again. Less like a boy wearing something borrowed. More like a story being rewritten. Every tiny adjustment felt symbolic. A little foundation. Just enough to even out my skin. A light touch of mascara. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. Just subtle changes that felt terrifyingly natural. I watched the mirror more than I watched her hands. The mirror wasn't mocking me. It was observing. With every brushstroke, my expression changed. First I looked tense. Defensive. Like someone bracing for laughter. But then something else surfaced. Curiosity. I leaned forward slightly, studying the softness around my eyes. The way my lips looked fuller when I stopped clenching my jaw. The way my posture shifted when I wasn't forcing it to be rigid. "Relax your shoulders," Alina whispered. I did. And in that instant the person in the mirror exhaled too. There was no thunderclap of realization. No dramatic music. Just a quiet awareness creeping into the room. This wasn't just about clothes. It was about how I held myself. For years I'd carried this invisible weight, this expectation of how I should sit, speak, walk. Strength meant stiffness. Confidence meant volume. Vulnerability meant weakness. Now, sitting in that chair with the lavender dress pooling around my knees, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. It scared me. "Okay," Alina said finally, stepping back. "Stand up." I did. The dress swayed slightly as I moved. That tiny motion hit me harder than anything else so far. I wasn't used to fabric responding to me like that. It felt expressive. Like the mirror wasn't just reflecting me anymore. It was introducing me to someone. "Do you want to back out?" she asked quietly. The easy answer would have been yes. But something stubborn flickered inside me. Not pride. Not ego. Curiosity again. "No," I said, surprising myself. "Let's finish this." She smiled, but not in victory. In understanding. The final step was shoes. Low heels. Nothing dramatic. But when I slipped my feet into them and stood, the world tilted slightly. My balance shifted. My center of gravity changed. So did my perspective. I was taller in a different way. Not physically. Emotionally. The mirror showed someone who looked nervous but composed. Uncertain but present. For the first time since losing the bet, I didn't feel like a victim of a joke. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand yet. And the scariest part? I didn't want to look away. The first step outside felt louder than it should have. The front door clicked shut behind me, and the world didn't change, but I did. The air felt sharper against my skin, brushing against my legs in a way I wasn't used to. The hem of the dress moved with the breeze, alive in a way jeans never were. My sister walked beside me, not as a supervisor, not as a winner of some silly bet, but as quiet support. "You're walking too stiff," she murmured. Of course I was. Every muscle in my body was bracing for impact. For laughter. For whispers. The street looked the same as always. Neighbors watering plants. Kids riding bikes. A dog barking in the distance. Ordinary life. Except I wasn't ordinary anymore. Or maybe I was, and that was the real fear. We passed Mrs. Rahman from across the street. She glanced up briefly, smiled politely, then looked back down at her phone. No double take. No gasp. No drama. My heartbeat stumbled. That was it? No spotlight. No announcement. Just normalcy. It disoriented me more than mockery would have. We walked toward the small cafe near our house, the one I'd visited 100 times without thinking. Every step in heels felt deliberate, like punctuation in a sentence I didn't know how to finish. Click, click, click. The sound echoed in my head louder than it did on the pavement. I became hyper-aware of everything, my hands, where to place them, my shoulders, how they moved, my voice, how it might sound if I had to speak. When we reached the cafe door, I hesitated. The glass reflected us faintly. There it was again, the mirror. Not a bedroom vanity this time. A public surface. A quiet witness to who I was presenting to the world. For a second, I saw both versions of myself layered together. The boy I'd been yesterday, and the girl I appeared to be now. And I felt something unexpected. Grief. Not because I missed being a boy, but because I realized how tightly I'd been holding on to a definition that might have been too small for me. "Are you okay?" Alina asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. And that was the most honest thing I'd said all day. We stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed, cheerful and oblivious to my internal earthquake. A barista looked up, smiling the same way he always did. "Hi. What can I get for you?" His eyes met mine. And he didn't hesitate. He didn't squint. He didn't question. He just waited for my answer. My voice caught for a split second. I was suddenly aware of its depth, of how it might betray me. But then something steadied inside me. Not performance, not imitation. Presence. "Just a cappuccino," I said. Came out softer than usual. Not forced. Just unguarded. He nodded. "Sure." That was it. No scrutiny. No spotlight. As we sat down, I realized the tension I'd been carrying had cracked slightly. The world hadn't collapsed. No one had laughed. Instead, I felt seen in a way I hadn't expected. And the strange part? I wasn't entirely uncomfortable with it. But comfort can be just as terrifying as rejection. Because comfort makes you question everything you thought you knew. I didn't realize how fragile my confidence was until it was tested. It happened an hour later. Alina had insisted we walk through the small shopping plaza nearby. "If you're doing this," she said, "you're doing it fully." I nodded like I was brave. Inside, I was still balancing on invisible wires. The sun was higher now. More people. More eyes. Or at least that's what my anxiety told me. We passed a group of teenagers leaning against a railing, laughing about something on one of their phones. As we walked by, one of them glanced up. His gaze lingered half a second longer than comfortable. I felt it like a spotlight. My steps faltered. Was it curiosity? Suspicion? Recognition? My mind spiraled. I suddenly became hyper-aware of my hands again. Were they too big? My stride, was it wrong? My voice replayed in my head from the cafe. Did it sound convincing? Did I sound convincing? The mirror was everywhere now. In glass windows, in car doors, in sunglasses reflecting tiny versions of me. Each reflection felt like a silent interrogation. "Who are you really?" One of the teenagers whispered something to his friend. They both glanced over again. Heat rushed to my face. There it was. The moment I'd feared. I wanted to turn around. To run back home. To rip off the dress and prove to them, to myself, that this was temporary. That I was still in control. But then something unexpected happened. One of the girls in the group smiled at me. Not mockingly. Not suspiciously. Just kindly. And in that small, simple gesture, the panic loosened its grip. Maybe the whisper wasn't about me at all. Maybe I wasn't the center of anyone's story except my own. That realization hit harder than any insult could have. We kept walking. My heartbeat slowly settled. I straightened, not rigidly but deliberately. I wasn't trying to imitate anyone anymore. I wasn't performing femininity like a role in a school play. I was just existing. The dress moved with me. The heels clicked steadily against the pavement. And for the first time since stepping outside, I stopped monitoring every breath. "Proud of you," Alina murmured quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For not running." I didn't respond right away. Because the truth was I had wanted to run. Not just from them. From myself. From the possibility that this wasn't just a dare. That this wasn't just fabric and makeup. That maybe something deeper was surfacing. We stopped in front of a boutique store with a wide polished window. I caught my reflection again. But this time I didn't see conflict first. I saw resilience. There was fear in my eyes, yes. But there was also strength. A different kind of strength than the one I'd been taught to perform growing up. Not loud. Not dominant. Quiet. Steady. Real. And for a split second, I felt something bloom in my chest that I hadn't expected at all. Pride. Not because I passed. Not because no one noticed. But because I stayed. Because I didn't run. And that tiny victory felt bigger than the bet itself. Still deep down I knew the hardest part hadn't happened yet. The world was kind today. But what if it wasn't tomorrow? What if this feeling lingered after the 24 hours ended? What if I didn't want to step back? The hardest part wasn't strangers. It was family. Around 6 in the evening, Alina checked the time and gave me a look that made my stomach twist. "Mom and Dad will be home in 10 minutes. The air shifted. Up until now, this had felt like an experiment contained within the outside world. Cafes, sidewalks, shop windows. Controlled risks. But home was different. Home was where I'd built the version of myself everyone knew. The version I wasn't currently wearing. I stared at the hallway mirror again. It had followed me all day like a quiet narrator. Morning nerves. Afternoon pride. Now dread. "You don't have to," Alina said softly. "We can explain before they see you." I shook my head. "No," I whispered. The bet was full commitment. But this wasn't about rules anymore. This was about fear of disappointment. I heard the front door unlock. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Their footsteps entered the house casually. Keys dropping into a bowl, shoes sliding off. Normal sounds. Familiar sounds. And then my mom looked up. For a split second, confusion flickered across her face. She saw a girl standing in the living room next to her daughter. Then recognition hit. Her eyes widened. My dad froze mid-step behind her. The silence stretched longer than it should have. I felt small. Smaller than I had all day. Smaller than the dress. Smaller than the bet. Smaller than my own reflection. "Is this?" My mom began slowly. "I lost a bet," I said quickly, my voice steadier than I felt. 24 hours. Full commitment. My dad blinked once. Twice. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. Just surprised. "Well," he said, glancing at Alina, "I guess you shouldn't gamble." Relief rushed through me so fast it almost made my knees buckle. My mom stepped closer, studying me. Not critically. Just thoughtfully. "You look comfortable," she said quietly. That word hit deeper than anything else today. Comfortable. Was I? I hadn't asked myself that directly. Fear. Yes. Embarrassment? First. But now? Standing in my own living room, under the gaze of the people who raised me, I searched the mirror again. I didn't look like someone being humiliated. I looked like someone learning. Dinner that night felt surreal. My parents didn't treat me differently. They didn't make it dramatic. My mom even asked casually if the heels were uncomfortable. "They are," I admitted, and everyone laughed. The tension dissolved. But later, when I retreated to my room, still in the dress, still in the makeup, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared into the smaller mirror above my desk. The house was quiet. The world wasn't watching anymore. It was just me. And her. The reflection. The girl who had walked through public streets. Ordered coffee. Faced whispers. Stood in front of her parents. She didn't look fragile. She looked thoughtful. "Who are you?" I whispered. And for the first time all day the question didn't feel like fear. Felt like possibility. But possibility is dangerous. Because once you see it you can't unsee it. And I still had hours left before the bet ended. Hours to feel. Hours to think. Hours to decide what this meant. Night has a way of stripping away performance. When the house finally went quiet and the lights dimmed, I stood alone in front of the mirror again. No audience, no expectations, no bet hanging over my head like a deadline. Just me. The makeup was slightly smudged from the long day. The lavender dress no longer felt like a costume. It felt lived in. The heels were off, resting by the door like exhausted witnesses. I leaned closer to the glass. All day the mirror had felt like a judge. Then a witness. Then a quiet ally. Now it felt like a question. I touched my own reflection lightly, fingertip against cool glass. "You go back tomorrow," I murmured. The words didn't echo with certainty. That scared me. I tried to imagine waking up in the morning, washing off the mascara, folding the dress, stepping back into jeans and the familiar weight of being normal. It should have felt relieving. Instead, it felt incomplete. Not because I wanted to abandon who I was, but because today had shown me something I hadn't allowed myself to see. How much of myself had been performance? How many gestures had I rehearsed over the years to look strong, to look composed, to look like what everyone expected a guy to look like? And why had softness felt forbidden? I sat down slowly on the floor, back against my bed, dress pooling around me. I thought about the teenagers at the plaza, the barista, my parents. No one had shattered. No one had exploded with outrage. The world had kept spinning. And in that spinning I had found something fragile and precious. Freedom. Not freedom from being male. Freedom from pretending that masculinity had to be rigid. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. Alina peeked in. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, then hesitated. "Did you ever think about this? About how weird it is that clothes can feel like identity?" She smiled gently. "Clothes don't make identity, but they can reveal parts of it." Her words settled deep. After she left, I stood once more before the mirror. This time I didn't search for flaws. I searched for truth. I saw a face that had carried fear, then pride, then confusion, then something softer. Acceptance. Not of becoming someone else, but of being allowed to explore without shame. The clock ticked loudly on my wall. 6 more hours. I lay in bed still wearing the dress, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. The whispers. The smile from that girl at the railing. My mom's thoughtful expression. The word comfortable echoed again. Maybe comfort wasn't about labels. Maybe it was about honesty. As sleep slowly pulled at me, one final thought lingered. Tomorrow when the mirror shows me him again, will I recognize him the same way? I woke up before the alarm. For a split second I forgot. Then I felt the fabric against my skin, light and unfamiliar in the quiet gray of early morning, and everything rushed back. 24 hours. Almost over. The house was silent. Dawn pressed softly against the curtains, turning the room into a muted watercolor. I slipped out of bed carefully and walked to the mirror. There it was again. The witness. The question. The girl in the reflection looked tired, but peaceful. The fear that had lived in my eyes yesterday morning was gone. In its place was something steadier. Something integrated. I tried to imagine the exact moment the clock would strike the end of the bet. Would something shift? Would I feel released? Or would I feel loss? The realization unsettled me. I wasn't afraid of going back. I was afraid of pretending nothing had happened. I moved to the bathroom, washed my face slowly, watching mascara dissolve underwater. The girl in the mirror began to fade. Not dramatically, not painfully. Just gently. Like a sunset. But something remained. Not the dress. Not the makeup. The posture. The softness. The permission. I caught myself standing differently, less rigid, less defensive. I wasn't forcing my shoulders wide. I wasn't tightening my jaw. It felt natural. The clock on my phone read 8:59 a.m. 1 minute left. My heart pounded unexpectedly hard. Why was I nervous? This was supposed to be the easy part. The return to normal. The second the clock flipped to 9 o'clock, I exhaled. "That's it," I whispered. The bet was over. I walked back into my room and stood before the full-length mirror one final time in the lavender dress. For a moment I didn't move. I just memorized it. Not because I wanted to freeze time, but because I didn't want to dismiss it. This wasn't a joke, I said quietly to my reflection. It mattered. Then slowly I reached for the zipper. The sound was louder than it should have been. As the dress loosened and slipped from my shoulders, I expected relief. Instead, I felt something closer to gratitude. I folded it carefully, not like a prop, not like a costume, like something that had carried me through a storm. When I changed back into my usual clothes, I studied myself again. The mirror didn't show two separate people anymore. It showed one, a little braver, a little more aware. I ran a hand through my hair and noticed I wasn't rushing to harden my expression. I didn't feel the need to rebuild the walls I'd quietly dismantled yesterday. The bet had ended, but the question hadn't. Who am I when I'm not performing? And as I stepped out of my room to start a normal day, I realized something powerful. I hadn't lost a bet. I had gained perspective. I thought the story would end the moment I took off the dress. It didn't. The real ending came later that afternoon, when I passed by the hallway mirror without thinking, and paused. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. I was back in my usual clothes, my usual stance, my usual reflection staring back at me. But the rigidity that once framed me like armor was gone. My shoulders rested naturally. My gaze wasn't defensive. For years I treated identity like a fixed statue, solid, unmoving, carved in stone. Yesterday had cracked it open, and instead of crumbling, it breathed. Alina leaned against the wall behind me. "So," she asked carefully, "regret it?" I met my own eyes in the mirror before answering. No, that was the truth. I didn't regret the whispers that might not have even been about me. I didn't regret the nervous walk into the cafe. I didn't regret the fear in front of my parents. I didn't even regret the moment of doubt when I wanted to run. Because every one of those moments had peeled something away. Not my identity, my insecurity. I realized something simple but powerful. The dress hadn't changed who I was. The heels hadn't rewritten my existence. The makeup hadn't created a new person. What changed me was allowing myself to experience vulnerability without shame. That was the transformation. Not male to female, but guarded to open. The mirror had followed me like a silent narrator through it all. Morning anxiety, afternoon courage, nighttime reflection, morning release. And now it showed me something whole. A version of myself that understood strength didn't have to look one way. That comfort wasn't about fitting into a box. It was about being honest inside it. Later that evening, I carried the folded lavender dress back to Alina's room. "Thank you," I said. She raised an eyebrow playfully. "For losing." I smiled. "For letting me try." Because that's what it really was. A chance. A safe space to test the boundaries I'd built around myself. Before that day, I thought being seen differently would break me. I thought stepping outside the expectations I'd quietly obeyed would shatter something essential. Instead, it stitched something together. The bet lasted 24 hours. The lesson didn't. Now when I catch my reflection, whether in a cafe window or the dark screen of my phone, I don't see a courtroom anymore. I see a conversation.